Listen to the Vibes, hosted by Coyote Night. Listen in for some positivity and good times. The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I have here Mr. Maxwell Ivey. He's known as the Blind Blogger. He's got some motivation, some inspiration, and some advice for you folks. And he's going to help teach you how to promote yourselves. And first of all, Mr. Ivey, I would like for you to just tell us about you.
Right. Well, since we've already, been hanging out here for like a half hour, you can call me Max. But so I grew up in a family of carnival owners in East Texas near Houston, and actually was blessed to be able to work in the family business, doing the bookings, operating some kids' games, and occasionally helping set up and take down the rides. Until 2003, my dad passed away to lung cancer. And a few years after that, we realized we weren't able to keep our business going without him. We would eventually combine our rides with my uncle's carnival and, for all intents and purposes, be out of the business. And so I needed something else to do. And I started helping people sell used rides, because when you have a small carnival like we did, the only way you could buy newer stuff was to sell the stuff you already had, and I'd help my dad do it. So I thought I could do that. I started the website in 2007, which was before WordPress, Wi-Fi, or Facebook. And I had to learn a whole bunch of new things, including how to hand code HTML, how to recruit clients and set fees and write ad copy and manage media. People started noticing, as social media came along, people started noticing the work I was doing, and they told me how inspirational it was to see me taking on these difficult challenges and just continuing to go forward. So they encouraged me to they encouraged me to find a way to share my experiences as a blind entrepreneur. And that led to theblindblogger.net, where I do share the struggles, the setbacks, the problems, the solutions, the celebrations of being an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. I've written and published 4 books so far, including my latest one, The Blind Blogger's First Speaking and Signing Adventures, How You Can Conquer Your Fears. I've been on over 250 podcasts. I now help people, teaching them to be great podcast guests or booking them on shows so they can share their story and reach new audiences and grow their passion. I sing in public. I've done public speaking where I share my story to encourage others. And now I have my own podcast, the What's Your Excuse Show. And over the years, I've managed to accomplish a lot of these things by following 3 main principles, which are that you have to decide to find solutions instead of making excuses. You need to feel the freedom to ask for help and accept help when offered. And you have to be determined to find the positive in all aspects of your life. And that last one is the hardest of the 3, but anybody can do these with practice and effort and dedication. And thankfully, they've helped me get to where I'm at now, which is a successful blogger, author, speaker, etc. And, hopefully by sharing what's going on in my life, I'll encourage other people to take action and go after their goals.
Oh, well, shoot, it sounds like you just explained everything in less than 5 minutes. Show's over.
Show's over.
So a little off topic here. Do you know where Baytown is?
Yeah, I know where Baytown is. I live, maybe 30, 40 minutes from there. It's like East Houston.
Okay.
And it's the ship channel. It's really that part of Houston is really the heart of Houston. It's the oil industry, the ship channel, the interstate highway system that takes from here to the rest of the country. And it's also like the number one place to see ruined carpet hanging out front of people's homes because it floods all the time.
No kidding. I was born and raised there.
Cool. Yeah.
In fact, if you're familiar with Texas Avenue, where the Brunson Theater used to be, I live just a couple of blocks away from that.
Well, my knowledge of Baytown isn't that good, but it's nice to run into another guy from Houston, even if we did have to meet virtually and be halfway across the country from each other.
Well, I'll tell you this: if you're familiar with the John Wayne movie, what was it called, The Hellfighters?
Yeah.
That was filmed in Pelly, which was just not too far from where I grew up.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my claim to fame. Texas Avenue was where they filmed RoboCop 2.
I'll be darned. Now that I wouldn't have expected.
So
I wouldn't think it was urban enough to be in a movie like RoboCop. But I guess that's the magic of Hollywood.
yeah, you wouldn't recognize it. So
Yeah.
our other claim to fame is Gary Busey is from Baytown.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm originally from Spring. I've lived in. I'm originally from Spring. I now live in Conroe, and I couldn't tell you anybody famous from either one of those towns.
Well, Spring is actually a pretty awesome place. So I have a lot of friends that live in Spring out there, kind of close to the woodlands too.
Yeah. Well, when we lived in Spring, my grandfather moved the entire family out there in the 60s, and it was just being converted from farmland into housing, and it was a couple of miles from our house to the next nearest neighbor. There were still neighbors that had cattle and still neighbors that had huge vegetable areas, and but my grandfather bought a big piece of land. He gave over part of the land to each of his kids so that none of them would have to live in Houston, and they'd all still be together. And since they were all pretty much in the same business, it worked out for a lot of years until the oil boom of the 80s, which I guess was the second or third oil boom, and the land got to be worth enough that my grandmother sold it, and since then everybody's kind of scattered all over the place.
Oh yeah. Well, out there towards the woodlands, I mean, that's pretty expensive out there. You got the amphitheater out there and all that.
Yeah. So the thing, the thing I do the most is I'm really big in as being a podcast guest, as helping other people get on shows, teaching people about being interviewed, and I like to start off with letting people know that even a bad show can have a good result for you, because it only takes one person to be affected by what you're sharing, and sometimes that one person is the host. I mean, sometimes I've done brand new shows where it was just me and the host, and he had 3 downloads a week, or so it really as long as you go up and give people your best effort at sharing your story and your experiences, your knowledge, trying to teach them something while you're on show, there's something good can happen of it. It happened from it. And this is something I learned in my very first podcast interview in February of 2013. It was actually a radio show called Brian the Hammer Jackson had a show on Blog Talk Radio at the time. And he posted an ad on LinkedIn wanting people to come on and talk about their small businesses. And so I reached out to him, filled out the form, and they decided to have me on. Set out in my garage on a cold Friday morning. It was Houston, so it wasn't frigid cold, but it was still not as warm as it was in the house. Waiting for my turn, and the guy calls, and my phone drops the call.
Oh no!
And then I tried calling back, and he or his producer hung up on me. And then eventually we got connected, and the host goes, "Man, what is wrong with you? Are you blind or something?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And then Brian got really quiet, and he didn't say nothing. And I know you're going to appreciate this because you do a couple of live shows. So for about 2.5 minutes, we had dead silence, which is, which in live radio or television is the worst thing that can happen. It's almost worse than profanity, depending on the profanity. It's just the one thing you don't want to have. And so finally, for some reason, I thought it was funny. I laughed at it, and then he started laughing. And then we talked for a couple minutes, and he said he was really sorry about what happened. He asked me to come back on the next week and tell people more about what I did in brokering equipment and how I did it as a blind person. So the next week I called him back, and I ended up doing his show every week, every Friday morning for about 6 months before I decided that there was probably more shows out there I could be doing to promote my business, and started reaching out to other hosts. But that was my very first experience of ever doing it. And I was thinking, I'll be lucky if this guy actually does want me to talk to him again next week. But he did, and it worked out really well. And the truth of the matter is I did that first radio interview because I live in Houston and I am blind, and we don't have much in the way of mass transportation in this area, especially not this far out from Houston. So I had to find a way to reach out to people without leaving the house. And so I did that. And I've done a whole bunch of podcast interviews. I've done radio. I've even done a couple of TV. And it basically started out as something I did in self-defense. And then as I did it longer, people started asking me, well, Max, how are you getting on all these shows? And I would write them these long emails and tell them how I was getting on these shows. And they would write me back and say, that's too much work. Could you help me get on the shows? And I thought about it. I said, I don't know that I'm ready to do this as a business or even as a serious hobby. But people kept asking, and eventually my good friend Michael Babcock from Oregon, I sent him one of them letters. He said, Max, this is too much great content. You can't keep giving this stuff away. So you need to turn this into a course or a workshop or something where you teach people how to do it. And so I took his advice and recorded an audio course. And then eventually he convinced me to take on some beta clients. He said, if you're not convinced what you do for you will work for other people, then find you a couple people that will let you do it for free and work with them. And so I reached out online, and I tell you, I was shocked how few people actually wanted to have work done for them for free, man. It surprised the heck out of me, because it took me a month to finally find 3 people, and several of the people that I talked to were interested, but they wouldn't provide the information that I'd need, so I would be able to tell a good story for them to introduce them to hosts. But I did find three people, Alex Okoroji, who hosts a podcast called The Naked Talk. It's about authenticity, not about people taking off their clothes. Tim Olson, who's a minister, a men's minister now. He was abused as a child. He wrote a book called Growing Up Nobody. And he did have a podcast, but now he's strictly an author. And then also Dave Steele, who is a visually impaired poet from the UK who writes very upbeat, positive, long-form poetry. I mean, like hundreds of words so I worked with him a little bit as well, and I had those 3 people, and I just started doing that for them, and was very happy to be able to help them find ways to share their stories. Alex is from Nigeria, Michael is from South Dakota, and Dave is from the UK. So it was really cool to be able to introduce these people to hosts from, all over the US. And then, lately, as I've found some other platforms, introducing my current friends and clients to people all over the world. And that's the really cool thing about it. Just last month, I did a podcast interview with a fellow from Karachi, Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
And, we talked about my story and how I inspire other people by sharing it. And, just the other day I talked to a guy from Australia, and, when you do a show from Australia, they're a day ahead of me,
15 hours.
Talk to them. Yeah. You talk to them here at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning. And that's kind of a weird sort of a feeling to know that, there's that much distance between you. But I've had some great interviews with those Aussies. And so I said I started out doing it because I didn't have a choice. I had to have a way to connect people, because if people don't know about what you're doing, they can't hire you. They can't buy from you. They can't even start to get to know you and decide what to like you or not. And thankfully, I got in the beginning as far as doing podcasts and radio interviews. And now a lot of people are doing it as a way of creating content, promoting their businesses. But I think I bring a few unusual approaches to it. And for me, a lot of it starts with the why, because most people, they think the only reason I do this is to promote myself. And they'd be wrong, because the first thing that this does is this is a high energy way of creating content for my website. This is the most fun, most enjoyable thing I do. It's far more enjoyable than a Facebook post or a blog article or exchanging text messages or being on Twitter. This is fun. I get to sit down and have a conversation with people that either know what I'm doing and understand it, or they at least have spent a little time trying to figure out what I do. And, that interest is, it's very valuable. It makes you feel good. And when I go through the process of getting ready to record an interview, you start thinking about your next conversation, you put on your headphones and you get ready. There's an emotional lift that I get from that. And I try to explain that to my students and to other people who are considering doing these interviews, that it's not just the promotional value, it's the emotional value.
Right.
And that, and that's something I think you understand, because, we had a really cool conversation before this started. And I could tell that we both were interested in the other's well-being, and we just met each other today. And that kind of leads into my second thing with podcasting, where I'm a little different than most people. To me, my least favorite show is the kind where they use a platform where you show up, it starts, you do your thing, and it stops, and you're done. To me, I kind of look at it like when I was in college. Some of the most important things I learned from the professor, I learned before his lecture started or after his lecture was over. And it's that way with a podcast interview. I've learned things about you, and you've learned things about me while we were getting ready to record. And the same thing will happen afterwards. And then the third thing that I bring to this that's a little different is, to me, not only do I see this as a way of building relationships, but I see it as a potential for additional opportunities. I like to look at it as would you like a hot apple pie with that? That, McDonald's sold millions, if not billions, of apple turnovers with that simple question. And a lot of times after I'm through doing a podcast, I'll exchange an email with the host, and I'll find out that they have a book collaboration they're working on, or they have a virtual conference or an in-person conference they're working on, or they accept guest posts on their blog. There's all sorts of other opportunities that a host may be working on. Sometimes a host will have an online or even an in-print magazine. So there's lots of things that you may have going on, or that you may think about doing later down the road. And if I stay in contact with you and maintain the friendship, I'm going to be one of the first people that you think about. Or if I contact you, you're going to think, well, we actually got to know each other a little bit, and he can contribute what I need for this particular project. You'd be more likely to say yes to me than the other hundreds of thousands of people who might ask you for the same opportunity at some point in the future. So to me, it's emotionally beneficial, it's relationship building, and it leads to additional opportunities. So that's one of the things I do different where it comes to these podcast interviews. And the people that I get that make the least sense to me and I get the biggest laugh out of are the people who say they want to do 30 podcasts in a month or 50 in a month or one a day for an entire year. And I'm like, taking all the fun out of it, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really do. Yeah. And like you said, the relationships, that seems to be how this becomes more of a success. My show is for people to come on and have a voice. I find that very important. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. You could be on the other side of the fence from what I believe, but I still believe that you deserve to have your voice heard. And I've also really believed in helping folks. And this is the way to do it. And unless you have the real passion for it, your show's not going to be a success. Now, granted, I don't have, millions of followers and stuff, but the people that do watch, I get such an emotional high when they message me and they say, thank you for that. I really enjoyed this episode because this person that you had on, they touched me in a certain way and, inspired me, whatever it is. But if I come to you and I say, I've got this podcast, I feel like I should improve it, where do we start?
Well, I would say the first place to start is to throw out the numbers. Yeah, I noticed you were just talking about you don't have thousands or millions of downloads. I mean, and the one thing I've learned being on the other side of the mic, as well as being a host of my own show, is that those numbers, for the most part, they don't have a lot of meaning. The number that matters are the people who listen to your show on a regular basis, that are loyal listeners, who will send you an email and tell you how good you did, or they will send you a post on social media and tell you how badly you did. They are invested in your show. They want you to succeed. They will ask their friends and relatives to watch or listen. So I'd say one of the first places to start is just to throw out the numbers and focus on doing the show based on your personality. Because if you're true to yourself, if you're invested in your show, if you're showing up on a regular basis and providing the best content you can in a way that pleases you, then eventually you're going to grow the audience. I've been on shows that have 50,000 listeners or they have 200,000 listeners. I've occasionally been on shows where they at least claim to have over 1 million listeners. And for the most part, the best responses I get as far as number of listeners usually comes from people that have brand new shows or relatively new shows, or shows where the host doesn't really think that they have a powerful show. So it really just comes down to what is important. Is it having the numbers or having the influence? Having the reach, knowing that people care about you and your show, and that they are going to tell others, and they're going to buy from you if and when you get to a point where you want them to buy from you through either a sponsor, product or service, or by purchasing a product that you created, like a book or a course or whatever. And the main thing for most people, their biggest problem is not making a podcast better, because if they get to the point where they've done enough episodes where they're worried about making it better, they've got past the hard part. The hard part is just actually launching and posting that first episode, getting past the whole idea that you're not good enough, that your tech isn't quite right, your editing skills aren't good enough, getting past all those excuses that people have in their heads before they record the first episode. Because if you get to where you've done 10 episodes, then you're one of those people that's going to keep recording your show. And if you listen to yourself and listen to your audience, you're going to find out what it takes to make your show better. For example, for me, I recently kind of backed into having John Lee Dumas on my podcast. Now, he's not the person I would have normally go after because he's a business guy. And I actually told him I didn't think he'd be a good fit for my show because he had never struggled or suffered any adversity. And my show is about overcoming things. It's about how we become the people we are now, not people that are always talking about their success. I found out that he had struggled. He had fought in combat and lost some of his buddies in the fight. And I interviewed him. We had a great interview. It's the least listened to episode in the history of my show. Mm-hmm. And the reason, and I think there are two reasons. One, he's not my normal guest. And two, the interview is only 15 minutes long. I usually spend a lot more time than that with my guests, and I usually get my guests to reveal something that they haven't said either ever or recently. So I think that particular show proved to me, Max, your audience could care less if somebody famous is on your show. They want to hear from real people who have had real struggles, and they want you to actually, spend some time with them. And, my show is one of those shows. It's, as like yours, it's probably 45 minutes to an hour on average. But people didn't want the short, concise, to the point, non-rambling interview. They wanted me to be Max. And so if you look at the shows before that and after that, they're all where they usually are, which I'm not ashamed to say it, between 50 and 75 downloads per episode. So, but that particular show, as one podcast host replied to me when I said, he said, I bet you thought John Lee was going to make you famous. I said, well, I didn't think he was going to make me famous, but I thought he would at least, click a couple hundred downloads. And if the guest doesn't fit you, or if the format doesn't fit you, if you break the mold of what your listeners expect to hear when they tune into your show, it's not going to serve you. So I think I think more people should listen to themselves. They should listen to their audience. They should occasionally reach out to their audience. If somebody takes the time to send you a comment or email, write back to them and go, well, what is it that makes you love the show? What is it that I did this particular episode that made you react to the point that you felt you had to write me? Find out what it was that tugged at their heartstrings or that pissed them off, so that you can do it again or not do it again next week.
It's actually some great advice. I never thought about that. And I've had some famous people on the show, and I love doing those interviews. But when I find somebody that like yourself, that really has that content, really has something to say, and maybe you're not a movie star, that doesn't matter. It's what you have to say. And I had a guy that was a photographer. I honestly, I wanted to have him on because I loved what he does, and I love his advice. And I said, you know what, let's do the show. And I didn't think I was going to get a whole lot of views and listens to it. And it ended up being a lot more popular than I expected, because the guy was really interesting. And I've had famous people on there that I probably got 5 people that watched. It kind of shocked me, I was like, I thought this person, he's a television star, or all these people would watch it. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. What's worse is a lot of the famous people don't even really put in the effort to get people to watch your show when they're on it.
Nope.
I can't speak to your guest. I can say nice things about John Lee, because his staff did reach out to me and they offered to give the page hosting his episode a free search engine optimization treatment to help more people find it. And so that helped. But a lot of times the famous people, they don't really do anything other than, maybe they'll mention that they're going to be on your show. But, as far as really trying to tell people to come watch or listen, a lot of times the famous people won't do that. But I think what really comes down to is this. People, they see somebody like me or you, and they think, if that guy can do it, then I can do it too. Or as people have said about me, if Max can do it, then what's my excuse? But when they see a famous person who's been successful, no matter how much that famous person had to struggle before they became famous, the attitude becomes more like, well, that person's a celebrity. That person's a millionaire. That person has thousands or hundreds of thousands of people fawning all over them. Mm-hmm. That can't be me, So I think that's why shows like ours, quite often, the people that aren't famous yet, or that maybe will never be famous, they become compelling interviews because they share real world experiences from somebody who looks like me, as in the eyes of the person on the other end of the screen. So, and just one other thing I like to go back to on the podcast is the most difficult part is recording that first episode and putting it out in the world. But until you press publish, until you put it out there where somebody can hear it, it can't help anybody. So I like to make sure people know, don't wait until you believe your story is good enough to start sharing it. Don't wait until you think your podcast is good enough to press publish. Don't wait until you think your book is good enough before you put it on Amazon or wherever. Because the truth is if left up to most of us, our stuff is never going to be good enough. We're always going to think we need a new microphone or a new software, or we need to pay somebody like Facebook or Twitter to promote us. There's always going to be something. So I do my best to remind people to just press send. Don't let that fear keep you in your way. I mean, heck, I still am not a high-tech person. I'm using a $40 headset, recording on my laptop. People have tried to explain to me that I need better equipment now that I've been doing this longer. And yeah, we've added some lighting and a new camera, but the camera costs $40 or $50. The light costs $30 or $40. You know, none of this stuff is expensive. I don't have a fancy studio or need one, because I finally just decided to go ahead and start. Now, I did have some help. When I first started my podcast, What's Your Excuse? I had been telling people for a while that I would have my own show when somebody would help me with the technical stuff. So my friend Frederick Bai from Canada, he came along and he handled the tech stuff for the first year. So all I had to do was show up and have conversations with people, or show up and record myself talking. And that worked really great. And then finally he convinced me that I didn't need his help to record my show or to post it online. And so I've been doing this pretty much solo since then. But I'm the last guy who would say I'm an expert, or that I'm successful, other than the fact that I do have a fair number of people who listen every week, and who, if they can't find a new episode, they will send me an email and go, "What's up, Max? Are you okay? Is there something wrong with you?" Because, you know, they know that the odds are I'm going to post a new episode, even if it's not the greatest thing ever recorded, you know, because when it comes down to it, sometimes my mistakes have been more well received than the stuff I thought was perfect. That's another thing that more podcasters have told me over the years, is that the episodes they thought where they really killed it, where things went perfectly and they thought those would be their greatest episodes, usually they didn't draw much in the way of views or listens. And the ones where they thought things went terribly wrong, those often turned out to be the most downloaded shows. And I like to share this experience from when I recorded my first video as the blind blogger a little over 6 years ago. Now, I am almost totally blind. I have light perception, but I can only tell you if the light is on or off if I look towards it I look towards it when I flip the switch. Mm-hmm. And if I don't think to check to see if the lights are on, I really cannot see that the lights are on. So I recorded an episode and the lights were off, and people responded to it because it was my first video, and they're like, "Max, we really love what you shared with us, but man, it's like you're sitting in a cave. Did you know that there aren't no lights and that we can't see you? And man, you really should record this again or have somebody help you in the future." That was about a third of the people who saw it. The other 2/3 of the people who saw it were like, "Max, man, what a metaphor. You know, it's like the blind guy is going to lead us out of the darkness into the light. And you're going to teach us how to find the positive in all things we do. We just love this, Max. What a metaphor." And so I had to respond to that online and basically tell people, well, for the ones of y'all who thought it was a mistake that I should take it down, it's gotten this many views and this many comments, so there ain't no way in heck I'm taking it down. And for those who thought I did this on purpose, this was an accident. But now that the mistake has gotten such great response, I'm leaving it up. And I have done many things like that. I've got quite a few mistakes on my website, both the Blind Blogger and the Midway Marketplace before it. And the thing about those mistakes is they help people realize that you're a real human being, mm-hmm. and that you're not a want-to-be TV star with a crew that makes sure that everything always goes right. So I do my best to continue to be real and relatable, to borrow the big kid's expression. But basically, I just do it the best I can. And if it comes out perfect, fine. If it comes out, ain't so great, people can find lessons in that if I give them the opportunity to find lessons, which is why earlier this year I was at a conference and I attempted to sing karaoke. It went very badly because I did not have somebody to help cue me on the stage. But I'm told that I finished very strongly with the third verse of The River by Garth Brooks, that by the end of the song, I was in sync with the words and that I finished strong. I took that video from that conference and put it on YouTube and put it in a blog post. And I basically, it's how I do things, both in my podcast and in life in general. The post is titled, "Just Keep Singing," how bad karaoke can inspire others. That's because that's the way I do it. We just keep talking, we just keep singing, we just keep walking. And yeah, I know Dory from Finding Dory always said, just keep swimming. And the truth is, as long as we keep doing whatever it is that it brings us joy, as long as we keep doing it, eventually we're going to get there, wherever your there is, because I believe everybody has to decide what success looks like to them. To me, the fact that I get to have a conversation with you and hopefully inspire at least one of your viewers to take action, to do something, whether that's a blog, a podcast, an email newsletter, recording music, doing artwork, whatever that thing is. If we encourage one person today, then we've had success. And very seldom do I fail to inspire at least one person. We don't always hear from them, but it happens. And it happens because we just keep showing up. You just keep pressing record, and I just keep talking. So I encourage everybody to do what they can, to take small steps every day, and to just keep doing whatever it is that makes you happy. Even if you're not making money from it, even if you don't know if or when you ever make money from it. But if it makes you happy, if it brings you joy and it brings other people joy, or it helps other people, just keep doing what you do, and eventually you're going to get there.
Exactly. You couldn't have said it better. I was thinking of talking about that while you were saying it. I'm like, wow, he's reading my mind, because that's exactly what I wanted to say. I run a network, a podcast network, and I don't look for perfection when I talk to people and I bring people on board. It's that passion that they have for what they're doing. And it doesn't have to be a perfect show. Just as long as they're having fun at what they're doing, that's been the main purpose of doing what we're doing. And yeah, eventually I would love to start making a lot of money at what I'm doing. But if I don't, I don't. At least I'm doing what I enjoy. And when people ask me, hey, should I get this microphone? Should I get this? Because you know what? Don't go out and spend a whole bunch of money to do this. If later on down the road you want to improve things, you want to get something more expensive, okay, fine. But you don't need all that stuff. Just get on there and get started,
Just press record. Start talking. Start singing. Start doing comedy, whatever. I mean, because there's all sorts of podcasts. My favorite new brand of podcast is what they're calling they're calling it something audio. Audio fiction or something. We have people now that are creating podcasts that are a lot like the old-time radio programs of the 40s and 50s, and that's becoming a new genre of podcast. So I agree, don't invest in expensive equipment until you've done it a while, because one, you don't need it, and two, it'll put pressure on you, and three, it will become an excuse for not pressing record.
Exactly. It's kind of a crutch.
Exactly. You can blame not having the money to buy a fancy mic as the reason why you're not recording your podcast yet.
Wow, the heck.
When instead you can do like I did when I first started recording using QuickTime Pro and the built-in microphone on my laptop, something I still get grief from other podcasters.
You don't need all that fancy mess. And like you said, if you just touch one person out there, that makes it all worth it. I told this story a few times, but I used to be a Baptist preacher, and part of what I did was I would teach I'd have the children's church, and I'd be in front of them. And years later, I just happened to run into one of those kids, and I honestly did not recognize them, but they knew who I was and came running up to me, and they thanked me for a message that I gave them. I didn't even remember, but that touched me so much. It made everything worthwhile. That one person, that's all it took. So.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that's one of the things that's really hard to learn. It was hard to learn myself. It's hard to teach other podcasters, is that more often than not, we will never hear from the people we are affecting, but that's no reason to stop trying. That's no reason to stop recording just because they don't call, write, or email and say how great you are, because most people never will. And but that's no excuse not to keep putting yourself out there, not to keep recording your content. And when you do an interview show, it's a lot easier than doing a show where it's just you talking. But as long as you keep doing it, you have the potential to influence people and to change their lives, if you think about it.
Exactly. Like you said, you may never hear from them, and it's not about the praise. It's really about doing something that you enjoy, and when the joy is gone, that's when it's time to walk away. I almost got to that point. I was doing way too much, doing my stuff, helping other people do their shows, and I had to finally say, look, before I just totally do not like this anymore, I have to kind of step back a little bit. And so I warn anybody that's doing it, man, if it gets to be too much, you gotta kind of, you have to think about it. You have to step away a little bit.
Yeah. So. And sometimes that's the point where you don't give up the podcast, but you think, are there aspects of the podcast that I don't really have to do? Because there's a whole lot of should and should not in podcasting. There's a lot of things where the quote experts will tell you have to do them. Mm-hmm. But, if it comes down to a choice between quitting your podcast or maybe, not doing some of the things everybody else is doing for their show, then sometimes it's a matter of, as my good friend Alex used to tell me, Max, the successful people don't always do more. A lot of the times the successful people find stuff they don't need to do and eliminate those things from their lives. Mm-hmm. So it can be the same way with the podcast. And for me, I actually had that happen to me about a year after I started doing the show by myself. I started to get really frustrated with the platform that I was using to submit the audio so it could be syndicated to Apple and Stitcher and the other podcast platforms. Right. And I thought about quitting, but I thought, I enjoyed having these conversations with my guests. I just don't enjoy uploading the audio and then going through that process. I said, well, Max, who says that your podcast has to be in audio? And I was recording the video anyway, and Zoom was sending me the video anyway. So I thought, okay, I can upload the video to YouTube and Facebook, and that isn't a struggle at all. So for about 2 years, that's what I did. I posted just the video, and I kept the audio, figuring at some point in the future I would share those audios when I either could afford to hire a staff or found a better platform. And then last summer, I went to a place called Envisions in Wichita, Kansas, and did some presenting at an event called Level Up, which is a conference for teaching visually impaired high school and college age kids things like interview skills, grooming. And the main thing I was there for was to teach them how to tie a tie, which I had to learn how to do myself before I could teach them. But at the end of that week, so many of the male students said, man, learning how to tie a tie so that I would feel confident about doing that for an interview in the future was like it changed my life. And I'm like, okay, I don't see how that thing changed your life, but man, I'm glad I was here to be part of that. But the other thing that happened that week is I'm around these teenagers, and they're doing, workshops about possibly going into aerospace and electrical engineering and culinary arts and music production. And I'm thinking, these kids, they've got all these big dreams. Nobody's telling them that they can't do this stuff. They're encouraging them to do this stuff and to think of these as potential job, career paths and college education paths. And I came home and I said, Max, it was okay for the short term to just post a video. But after being around these kids, don't you feel like you've been kind of making an excuse? So I reached out to some people that are visually impaired who I know who are podcasters. They eventually told me to switch to Blubrry or Blueberry or however you say their name, because I'm still not sure. And that it was a very accessible platform for people using a screen reader like I do. I signed up with them. I got it set up within an hour. The head tech guy, Tom from Blueberry, actually got on the phone with me to make sure I had it all set up properly. It is very simple to upload the audio to it and then just write some text and add the links on WordPress as to, what the show is about and why people should listen. So, now I'm back on Apple and Stitcher and all those stuff, and I've been back on for a little over a year, since last July 1st. But there was a time where I said, this isn't helping. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. And if I keep trying to do this, I'm going to end up quitting. And I decided, okay, there's nothing that says I have to do it the way everybody else is doing it. So if you get to that point where you're tired, where you're not enjoying it anymore, before you quit, think about what aspect of your podcast it is that is not bringing you joy. What is it that's dragging you down? And it may be that you can just decide, well, I don't have to do social media posts for my podcast because I'm doing this because I love it, not because I plan on getting paid for it. Or it may be that you don't need to do a transcript because, there's it seems like everybody's doing a transcript of their audio now. It may be that you don't need to do a transcript, or maybe you only need to be on one social media network. If you get to the point where it isn't fun, like you said, then don't do it no more.
Mm-hmm.
But before you quit, think about all the jobs that you're doing and see if maybe there aren't a few of them that you're doing just because you think you're supposed to. And maybe you could eliminate those and maintain your joy and avoid having to quit altogether. Because we need as many podcasters out here as we can get. We need as many inspiring, educational, entertaining storytellers as possible. And I hate to lose people. If it gets to the point where it is too much, then yeah, they should quit. But if we can help them keep going in some way by encouraging them or by helping them brainstorm on ways they can make some of their tasks easier or eliminate them, then I want to do that too, because the world needs y'all's stories.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we need more positivity out there. And quite honestly, and this is my opinion, I just feel that people are looking for something real. You get bombarded with all this Hollywood, media garbage, and people are kind of sick of it, and they want somebody who is a real person, who is authentic, and they just have a passion for what they do. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Some of the shows that I do enjoy, there's no perfection to them. I honestly, I'll see stuff, and I'll see they have, 250,000 followers or whatever, and the shows, I just don't understand how they got that. Now I know that there's companies out there, they offer, you give me $30, I'll get you 300 followers or listeners or whatever, and maybe that's how they do it. But I don't find it entertaining. You can have all this cool production, but if the person that's doing what they're doing is boring.
Well, I'll help you out here. I was at a conference last year where they've done research on this, and they've actually found out that the more produced a podcast is, the more professional, slick looking the podcast is, the less likely people are to watch it reliably and be loyal followers of it, or even start listening to it in the first place.
Sure.
The numbers change if somebody famous is involved, but if we're just talking about unknown quantity versus unknown quantity, people are very suspicious of overproduced podcasts. And, you can actually grow your audience through your mistakes. And I personally believe that's what's worked for me. And I've got a great example for you. But dang it, I can't think of the woman's name right this second. There's a lady in Missouri whose family has run craft supply shops in Missouri, in a town in Missouri for years. Mm-hmm. It's like her grandkids are in the business now. And the business wasn't able to support the entire family. So half the family had jobs. And the grandson said, Grandma, how about you record some videos? And she said, okay, I'll do it. So the grandson is getting her mic'd up to record their first video because he's one of these YouTube kids. He's all in. The woman tripped over one of the wires and broke her hip.
Oh no!
But see, that's the good part of the story. They decide, since she's not going to be able to get around anyway, that's no reason to not do the videos. So she does the videos in her wheelchair for the first 2 months. She's in a wheelchair, and she openly admits that she was in that chair high on pain medicine doing these videos for the first 2 months. But that honesty was what really started to grow her audience, is what made people fall in love with these videos. And then you add the fact that she was an expert in her field in these crochet and craft type projects. So not only was she a real personality that they could root for, she was also very knowledgeable and could show people from novices to experts how to do these projects. And now they have 7 locations of this craft store in different cities in Missouri. Wow. The entire family works for the company now. And it all started with doing a podcast to just record some videos telling people how to do whatever craft project and to come by their supplies from this particular shop. And like I say, the woman, she was on, that show comes on Sunday morning. I think it's called Sunday Morning. She was on there being interviewed, and she just got the biggest laugh when she was telling people, yeah, for the first 2 months, I was doing these videos in my wheelchair with my leg propped up and half high on pain meds. So, these people want real and relatable personalities. That's why people like me and you, when we have famous people on our shows, it doesn't move the needle. But when we have real people who have real struggles and have found ways to overcome their obstacles, their fears, their tragedies, those are when people listen. Because, it's real. It's honest, it's authentic, it's whatever the current word is for there ain't no false or lie to it, Yeah. And people love those kinds of stories. They buy into them. And if we can produce those on a regular basis, then, they're going to come back to us week after week. And I highly encourage people, keep track of your downloads, but do it for this reason. Think about the show when you release it and think, was this my best show? Was this my worst show? Did I make 5 mistakes or 3 mistakes or 1 mistake or 10? And then look at your downloads. And I will be shocked if your audience doesn't show up more on the shows where you think, man, I really messed that up. I need to edit that out. But you don't edit it out, and you just put it out there and let people see you and your guests as you really are. I think that if you track your downloads to see that people are listening because you're real as opposed to listening because you had somebody famous on, I think that's a good use of statistics and metrics, because quite often we need to be reassured. And that's one of those ways where you can say, well, yeah, I screwed it up royally that week. I stuttered, or I couldn't pronounce the guy's name or whatever, and people still listen. And as a matter of fact, in the last 6 months, I've had 2 guests. I've had 1 guest on, and I've had 1 host who I couldn't pronounce their last names and told people I'm not even going to try, and nobody cared. I had a woman on my show, Annette Wittenberger, and I just told people, I said, look, instead of me butchering her name for the next hour, I'm just going to call her Annette, and nobody cared. And then I was on a show with a guy named David Pasqualoni. And I told him, I said, okay, David, you're either going to be just David or David P from now on. And nobody cared about that on his show either. I mean,
that's awesome.
So, you just have to be honest with yourself and your audience. You have to accept your mistakes and embrace them and have fun with them. And that's how you build an audience. Let them see you at your best and your worst. What's that old line about couples that stay married? They stay married because they've seen their spouse at their best, they've seen them at their worst, and they still like them.
Yep. Hey, my wife likes me the way I look when I first wake up in the morning. That's a good woman right there.
There you go. There you go, boss.
So, I think one of the things is nobody is perfect, and they want to see somebody that makes mistakes because they make those mistakes in their lives and they can relate to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because the media makes you think everything's got to be perfect, and it doesn't.
No, and sadly, we've got more and more professional, commercial-produced podcasts coming into the space because of Corona. And even before Corona, a lot of the national news media was starting podcasts. A lot of the news hosts were starting their own podcasts. A lot of the news shows are being repurposed as if they are podcasts. And to me, that's been one of the fun things about Corona is watching the professionals struggle, watching them screw it up, because I think that's really helpful to people like me who are like, yeah, I never aspired to be that good anyway. But when people that have a national news organization behind them can mess it up just as good as I can, to me, that's encouragement. That's proof that anybody can do this if they decide they want to. And I just have a lot of fun when you see these people, they're trying to do major interviews and dogs are barking and sirens are going off and microphones are crackling and people can't log into Zoom because they've never logged into Zoom before. I just think it's hilarious. But it's a great reminder that, ain't none of us perfect, as you said. The only difference is these people, they've got a staff, a team, a company behind them that helps them eliminate those mistakes. I'd rather just do it like we do it. Keep my mistakes, share them with people, and go on to the next interview. And the truth of the matter is, for me, I'm a really in-the-moment kind of person. So I have to really focus on the person I'm talking to.
Exactly.
And so when I'm having a conversation for my podcast, I honestly would not know I did something wrong until afterwards when, maybe I'm listening to it or somebody points it out to me, because, when you're in that moment, focused on just doing your show and listening to the guests and trying to decide based on what they said, what are you going to respond or what's your next question going to be? That just takes so much focus. I don't even notice my mistakes unless, like I say, somebody asks me about them later. And then usually I'll go, well, yeah, that wasn't what I planned, but man, that's pretty good,
I bought a book on how to podcast when I first wanted to get into it. And it just gives you this outline, how you need to have these questions written out and all this stuff for your guest and yada, yada, yada. So I did that. I did everything the book said. I hated those podcasts because I felt like I sounded like a robot. You know what I mean? And I just told my wife one day, I said, you know what? I am not going to write any questions down. I'm just going to have a conversation with the person I'm interviewing and just go on the fly, see how it works. And those were the best shows I ever did. And so that's the way I did it from then on.
Yeah. Well, for me, I agree with you. I'm horrible at trying to read stuff while I'm doing it, or, if I tried to remember a bunch of questions, it'd just be one more thing to stress over. It'd be one more thing that might talk me out of recording. And I'm all about avoiding those excuses and helping others avoid those excuses. So what I've finally decided is that the longer a conversation goes, the better I get. But I hate to think people might not be enthralled with the first 10 or 15 minutes of my interviews. So I now show up with one question one question that I want to know the answer to, whether my audience does or not. And the idea is I'm going to ask whatever follow-up questions come from that one question. But if I can get off to a good start and get into a real conversation with my guest, then the rest of the questions will show up from somewhere.
Yes.
They will say something that speaks to me, and I often have aha moments of my own. I often ask questions of my own specifically for me to solve problems that I may be facing or about to face. So I like to come up with one question and bring that to the interview. But after that, it's just all downhill, and we'll go wherever the guest and me decide we need to go next.
Well, if you do that, then you're paying more attention to who you're talking to. If you have questions written out, then at least in my case, it seems like I was waiting for that pause so I could get to the next question, and I wasn't really paying attention to who I was talking to. So it didn't seem real to me.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You have to find your interview style. I know people who I've had a few podcasts where they send me a request for questions to ask me, and if you don't send them the list of questions back, they won't have you on the show. And I'm like, man, I am just not that organized. Half the time I don't really know what I'm going to talk about unless the host knows. I mean, I have a general idea. We're going to talk about my experiences and the lessons people can take, and we may promote my business of training podcast guests or booking people on shows. But, I really just show up to wait and see what the host is going to ask and where we're going to go, because there have been times where I ended up having a conversation with the host, and I'm like, man, I ain't talked about that in a long time. And, back in March, I did a podcast where for the first time I talked about my experiences in a scouting troop for visually impaired and the work I went through to become an Eagle Scout. That's one of those things that doesn't come up in a lot of interviews, even though it's a big accomplishment. But, you just never know what you're going to talk about until you get there and see what that host questions are and what your responses are, and also, where you may have shared experiences, or when maybe the host may have an experience they share with you. And I love it that when a host will share their own personal experiences in the way they form their questions like you have, because it's just more opportunity to get to know the other person that you're talking with, and have a better conversation, and have a higher chance of sharing something that people out there needed to hear, or saying it in a way that they've never heard it said before. And it all comes down to trusting the host and just showing up and having a conversation, which I highly recommend, whether you're the host or the guest, is, you should never show up thinking I'm going to answer these questions, even if he doesn't ask them. And you should never show up thinking I'm going to ask these questions, whether they fit into the conversation or not.
Exactly. Sometimes a guest will come on and they'll say, you can ask me anything. Just ask me anything. I'm an open book. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask you then, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? And then they look at me like, what?
I've never managed to get there without biting one, so I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, if you go by the owl from the commercial, it takes 3, so.
Yeah, but he bit it after 3 because he got tired too.
Well, I'm going to ask you, how do folks get a hold of you if they need to contact you? What's your social media, your website, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so they can find me at theblindblogger.net, theblindblogger.net. They're also welcome to send me an email to justask@theblindblogger.net. My social media links are on the website. I'm really proud of my Twitter following, which is at Maxwell Ivey. Maxwell has 2 L's and Ivey is Ivey, but again, they can start on the website. They can find my blog on Alexa and Google. They can either ask for The Blind Blogger, or they can ask for What's Your Excuse if they want to listen to my podcast on their wireless speaker devices. And they can find me on Roku now at Knob TV, KNOB-TV. But again, most everything I do will eventually show up on the blog or the website at theblindblogger.net.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm
I've
glad we
enjoyed
were
it a
able.
lot too.
What was it Matchmaker that we met, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't mind people knowing, matchmaker.fm, radioguestlist.com, podmatch.com. There's a lot of platforms out there where you can find shows. But you know what is the one thing that's constant about all those sites?
What's that?
Is if you want to be on a show, you have to send somebody an email. You have to stick your hand up and say, pick me, no matter. So I don't mind sharing the websites because a lot of people either aren't confident enough or don't have the time and energy to send out those emails like I do. And thankfully, it's been a great opportunity for me because I get to do something that I'm good at, that I enjoy doing, that other people hate doing and aren't comfortable doing. And I can support my writing, traveling, and podcasting habit by helping other people get exposure. And it's been a real cool thing to go from something I did in self-defense to something I can do that really helps other people gain exposure for their creative enterprises, whether that be a podcast or painting or sculpting or even speaking.
Exactly. And by the way, Matchmaker is not a dating site.
No, not unless you count. Yeah, no, it's not. And my this is off topic, but my web browser keeps trying to send me to Match.com. I don't know why that is, but
Well, when I first signed up for it, I told my wife, if you see any emails come in from Matchmaker, I'm not looking for a date. So I love telling that story, though.
It's a good story. It's a good story. And as a storyteller, I appreciate those. I save those. But yeah, I'm single, so I don't have that problem. But I could see how the occasional married man might, or married woman might have problems with their spouse getting emails from matchmaker.fm. But I wish I could. I wish I knew the name of the host. Maybe is the guy who started it. I really love, and I hate saying this because I've got a friend named Alex who also has a website. But the one thing that podmatch.fm does that nobody else is doing this in the same level, and if you're just going to belong to one website to find podcasts to go on, matchmaker.fm is the one, and here's the reason. It's the only site of all the websites I'm a member of and all the email lists I'm subscribed to that is truly international, at least at this point. I mean,
yep.
You routinely, if you look at a list of results on their search engine, you'll routinely find over a third of the shows will be from somewhere outside the United States, yep, if not more. And that's not something that I've found on other websites, and I really enjoy doing it. I even thought about starting a Pinterest map or an Instagram map so I can put check marks on a globe or something, showing all the different places I've done podcast interviews at, because it is that much of an international website. And they are growing really quickly as far as new podcast hosts, and they're starting to be discovered because I'm starting to notice podcast hosts replying to my email telling me how many emails they got from people wanting to be guests and that they'll get around to me eventually. So, one of the things you have to get good at is you have to be willing to ask, and I'm known for saying if you don't ask, they can't say yes. And you have to have a creative approach. I find that I do better than average on getting people to say yes when I reach out, because I don't just go with the really short emails like the marketing textbook says you're supposed to write. I send messages to let people know who I am and why they need to have me on their show, and I want them to know what kind of story they're going to get when they book me. And I wish more people would do that. That's one of the things I teach my students, because hosts and clients, they don't buy your book. They don't buy your products or your services. They don't even buy you. They buy your story. So know what your story is, be willing to tell it, and use it whenever you reach out to people like us wanting to be on our podcast.
Well, I know when I got your message, I was like, I've got to have this guy on my show. So, yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate it.
That's what I appreciate it. I'm glad that you like it. And that's what I do for my clients. When I write emails, people are like, Max, why do you write custom emails? It's a lot of work. I'm like, yeah, but I get a lot of yeses.
Well, if it sounds like it's manufactured, then it's almost like spam. It's like, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The other thing I recommend is if you have a nickname, if there's a name you're known by online, of course I'm blessed because I'm the blind blogger, and you're filling out forms to submit to shows, instead of using your first and last name in those forms, use your show name or use your nickname or use your online AKA name in the first name field, and then use your first and last name in the second field. I find that really helps make an impression with hosts because they'll see that the email, they'll see that submission came from the blind blogger as opposed to coming from Max Ivey, and those are two different things. No, I'm not bipolar or what's that other thing when you have multiple personalities?
Right.
But I do know it makes it. I do know though that it makes a difference if I can use a submission form where I get to give them my moniker as opposed to my name, that automatically raises my positive reply rates on those submissions, because right away it lets them know that they're getting something different, something unusual.
Well,
somebody with a brand name. And so that's just, like a bonus thing for people. If you're considering reaching out to podcast hosts, it's a way you can stand out, be unusual, be memorable, and, kind of cut through when they're a show that gets a lot of inquiries.
Maybe I should do that when I'm asking people to come on the show.
Maybe. Y'all try it. Let me know how it works for you.
I'm going to try that. I use my on-air personality. My nickname's been Coyote since I was born, so that's kind of what I go by when I'm on air. So maybe I'll do that from now on.
Yep, you can always do what the big kids call a split test. You can, say you send out emails for 30 minutes or whatever. You can send half of them from as you and half of them as Coyote and see what happens.
I'm going to do that. I appreciate that you telling me that. It gave me that aha moment. Well,
yeah.
Max,
all right. Well, look, I appreciate you having me on the show. I think it's getting close to dinner time here, so but I do really appreciate the time and effort you put into these interviews and giving me the opportunity to share my story, because really, without people like you giving me these opportunities, there wouldn't be the blind blogger or a what's your excuse. It's because of having these opportunities that I have a brand and I've been able to accomplish a lot of things. And so I really want you to know how much I appreciate the time, effort, and money you put into doing this show.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, honestly. And I want to thank everybody that watches this or listens to us. Without you, I wouldn't be here. So thank you. And please stay tuned to the next episode. I guarantee you're going to enjoy it just like Mr. Maxwell Ivey here. And y'all take care. Catch you on the next one.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network and on Instagram at The Vibes Broadcast.